The old garage stood at the edge of town like a forgotten relic. Broken windows. Rusted doors. Weeds growing through cracked concrete. Most people didn't even glance at it when they drove by. But on a cold Monday morning, a struggling mechanic named Ethan stopped his pickup truck and stared at the building. Something about it felt different. Across the street, luxury SUVs were lined up outside the headquarters of Harrison Industries. Inside, CEO Victoria Harrison was finalizing a long list of assets to sell. The garage was at the very bottom. "Get rid of it," she told her assistant. "I don't care what we get for it." The building had belonged to the company for years. It generated no income. It required constant maintenance. And everyone considered it worthless. A week later, the property was listed. Buyers came. Buyers left. Nobody wanted it. Until Ethan arrived. He had barely $1,000 left in savings. His small repair shop was failing. Bills were piling up. Friends thought he was crazy. But when he stepped inside the garage, he noticed something nobody else had seen. Hidden beneath years of dust and neglect was potential. Massive potential. He immediately made an offer. Exactly $1,000. When Victoria heard about it, she laughed. $1,000? Take it. If someone wants that junk, let them have it. The paperwork was signed the next day. And just like that, Ethan became the owner of the most ignored building in town. What nobody knew was that his biggest discovery was still waiting beneath the floor. From sunrise to midnight, he cleaned years of dirt, removed broken equipment, and repaired damaged walls. The place looked worse than he had imagined. But he refused to quit. One evening, while removing an old workbench bolted to the concrete floor, he noticed something unusual. A metal hatch. Hidden beneath layers of dust. His heart started racing. The hatch was locked, but after nearly an hour of effort, he managed to force it open. A narrow staircase led underground. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and slowly descended. The basement was enormous. Far larger than the garage itself. Rows of shelves stretched into the darkness. Most were empty. But in one corner, he discovered dozens of old blueprints, engineering files, and storage records left behind decades earlier. As he examined them, one document caught his attention. It referenced an abandoned rail loading system connected directly to the property. Ethan couldn't believe what he was reading. The garage wasn't just a garage. Years ago, it had been a major distribution hub for manufacturing companies across the region. Nobody had realized it because the records had been forgotten. The next morning, Ethan visited the city archives. After hours of searching, he confirmed everything. The underground loading access still legally belonged to the property. That single discovery changed everything. Instead of opening another repair shop, Ethan created a new plan. A much bigger plan. He contacted small businesses struggling with warehouse space and offered affordable storage and shipping services. Within weeks, his first customers arrived. Then more. Then even more. The abandoned garage suddenly became one of the busiest locations in town. Money started flowing in. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't worried about bills. But across town, Victoria Harrison received a report that made her freeze. The property she had sold for $1,000 was generating serious revenue. At first, she thought it had to be a mistake. Then she saw the numbers. And her smile disappeared. Because Ethan's success was only beginning. Victoria stared at the report for several minutes. There had to be a mistake. 6 months earlier, she had practically given the property away. Now the same worthless garage was attracting investors, local businesses, and logistics companies from neighboring cities. How is this possible? She demanded. Her executives had no answer. Meanwhile, Ethan was busier than ever. The small operation had grown into a full-scale logistics center. Trucks arrived day and night. Storage units were fully occupied. New clients signed contracts every week. But Ethan wasn't interested in luxury cars or expensive vacations. Instead, he reinvested every dollar back into the business. He expanded the underground facility. Upgraded equipment. Hired local workers who had struggled to find jobs. Many of them had been unemployed for years. Soon, more than 100 families depended on the company Ethan had built. The town began to change. Restaurants became busier. New stores opened. Property values increased. People started calling Ethan the man who brought the town back to life. Then came the moment that shocked everyone. A national logistics corporation offered to buy his business. The offer was worth millions. More money than Ethan had ever imagined. His advisors told him to accept immediately. Friends said he'd be crazy to refuse. But Ethan surprised everyone. "No," he said. "I'm just getting started." News of the rejection spread quickly. And eventually, it reached Victoria Harrison. That was when she realized something painful. She had spent years looking at spreadsheets. Ethan had looked at possibilities. She saw an abandoned building. He saw an opportunity. Determined to understand his success, Victoria requested a meeting. A week later, she walked into the very garage she once called junk. Only now, it looked like the headquarters of a growing empire. And when Ethan greeted her at the entrance, she saw something she hadn't expected. He wasn't angry. He wasn't arrogant. Instead, he smiled and said, "Thank you for selling it to me." Those words hit harder than any insult ever could. Because deep down, Victoria knew the truth. She hadn't lost the property because of bad luck. She lost it because she failed to see its value. And Ethan was about to reveal a vision even bigger than anyone imagined. Victoria stood inside the transformed facility, still trying to process what she was seeing. The same cracked walls she once dismissed were now reinforced and modernized. The same empty space had turned into a fully active logistics hub. And the junk garage she sold for $1,000 had become a growing enterprise with regional influence. Ethan led her through the main floor. "This used to be the loading zone," he said calmly. "Now it connects to 3 distribution routes." Victoria stayed silent. Every corner she looked at raised another question in her mind. "How did you even finance all of this?" she finally asked. Ethan paused for a moment. "Not with money," he said. "With trust." He explained how he convinced small suppliers, local workers, and struggling vendors to invest time instead of capital. He offered them shared profits instead of salaries in the beginning. And slowly, the network built itself. Victoria had spent her career relying on capital and corporate systems. Ethan had built something different. A system built on collaboration. As they reached the underground section, Ethan stopped near a newly installed control room. Screens displayed live shipping routes, inventory flow, and regional demand patterns. "This is the real value," he said. "Not the building, but the system inside it." Victoria looked at the screens, visibly shaken. Her company had access to billions in resources. Yet she had never created anything like this. For the first time, she realized Ethan wasn't just lucky. He was thinking differently. Just then, one of Ethan's managers approached with urgent news. A major international investor had arrived. They were not offering to buy the business. They were offering to partner, and expand it globally. Victoria turned slowly toward Ethan. This time, her expression had changed. No arrogance. No disbelief. Only respect. Because the man she once dismissed was now being courted by global players. Ethan looked at the offer letter in silence. The next move would decide everything. Not just for him, but for the entire future of his empire. A polished conference table. Expensive suits. Carefully prepared documents. Everything looked perfect on paper. A global expansion deal. Multiple cities. International logistics routes. Millions in funding. This was the kind of opportunity most startups dream of. Ethan sat across from them, reading the proposal slowly. Victoria stood near the back of the room, watching. She expected him to accept immediately. Anyone would. But Ethan leaned back in his chair and asked one simple question. Why now? The lead investor smiled. Because what you've built is scalable. We want to take it worldwide. Ethan nodded, but didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the screens behind him showing live operations of his facility. Trucks moving. Workers coordinating. Local businesses depending on the system. Then he spoke. When I bought this place, it wasn't about scale. It was about survival. I built this with people who had nothing left to lose. The room stayed quiet. Ethan continued. If I accept this deal, control shifts far away from the people who built it. And that's something I won't risk. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected that answer. The investors tried again, better terms, higher valuation, more influence. But Ethan shook his head. No. One word. Final. The tension in the room thickened. The investors gathered their documents, clearly disappointed. But before leaving, the lead investor said something unexpected. If you ever change your mind, we'll still be here. When they left, the room felt heavier. Victoria finally stepped forward. You just walked away from millions, she said. Ethan smiled slightly. I walked away from control, he replied. A pause. Then he added. Money builds companies. But people build empires. That was the moment Victoria finally understood everything. She hadn't just sold a garage for $1,000. She had accidentally handed the future to someone who saw value where others saw waste. Months later, the town officially renamed the facility. Not as a garage, but as a regional innovation hub. And Ethan? He didn't become famous for what he bought. He became known for what he built from nothing. And every time someone asked how it started, he always gave the same answer. One forgotten garage, and a choice no one else wanted. 1 year later, the story of the garage had spread far beyond the town. What started as a forgotten property was now a regional logistics and innovation network connecting multiple cities. But Ethan wasn't focused on headlines. He was focused on what came next. Inside the upgraded headquarters, teams were working on expanding automated systems, improving delivery efficiency, and training new workers from nearby rural areas. The mission had quietly evolved. It was no longer just about survival. It was about rebuilding opportunity for people who had been ignored. One morning, Ethan received an unexpected visitor. Victoria Harrison. But this time, she wasn't there as a CEO. She had stepped down from her position weeks earlier. She looked different, less polished, more grounded. I wanted to see it one more time, she said. Ethan nodded and walked her through the facility. Victoria watched everything carefully. Noticing the employees laughing together. Noticing the trainees learning skills they never had access to before. Noticing the sense of purpose in the air. Finally, she stopped. I used to think value was what a company could sell, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her. And now, he asked. She hesitated. Now I think value is what it creates for people. A long silence followed. Then Ethan led her to the original underground hatch, the same place where everything had started. It was still there. But now it was preserved as a historical entry point. A reminder of where it all began. Victoria looked at it for a long moment. I almost threw this away, she said. Ethan replied calmly. You didn't throw it away. You just didn't see it. As she prepared to leave, she turned back one last time. "No regrets?" she asked. Ethan looked around at the growing network, the workers, the life the place now had. He shook his head. "Only lessons." Victoria smiled faintly and walked out. Months later, Ethan expanded again, this time beyond logistics. Education programs. Startup incubators. Training centers. The garage was no longer just a success story. It had become a foundation for others to start their own. And the legend of the $1,000 garage continued to inspire people who believed they had nothing.